If you watch my Ramfest video, you might already know that despite all my time working within the South African music scene, I have largely missed most of the large South African music festivals for a variety of whatever reasons. So when Jonathan, more commonly known online as Dizzy Khaki, reached out to me to be his second shooter for Misty Waters, I obviously jumped at the opportunity. A chance to experience a 3-day festival from behind the lens? Hell yes, I was in, of course. And let me tell you, what I experienced can only be described as a love letter to festival goers, music lovers, and most importantly, artists. And it's in Secunda, of all places. So with that in mind, here's what my Misty Waters 2026 looked like. First of all, let me preface this by saying that I am mostly going to be speaking on the music, the people, and the event itself. Since I am a broke boy, I had virtually zero experiences with the bars, food stalls, or any of the other shops that might have been littered around the grounds. So if you were there, let me know down in the comments what your experiences were. As I mentioned earlier, this was a 3-day festival from the 30th of April to the 2nd of May. Technically, there were 2 fests happening side by side, Misty Waters and the Fringe Fest, and while I didn't get to experience much of the Fringe Fest, I was front and center for every band on the main stage for Misty Waters. All 27 of them. And let me tell you, the quality of live music in this country never fails to amaze me. Misty was started about 9 years ago through Johan and Dion Rossley. Johan provides the venue, the infrastructure, and the support, while Dion handles the creative direction, the booking, and the production side of things. Even with Dion now based in the United States, the passion behind this festival is still obvious everywhere you look. Some important character context before we move forward with this. For those of you who are not in the know, Jono is a videographer who commonly goes by Dizzy Khaki online. If you were involved in the alternative scene in the 2010s, chances are you've seen Jono's work, whether you realize it or not. His live videos and his music videos documented such a massive chunk of that era, and he's one of the reasons, along with Not Russell Crowe, that I picked up a camera to start filming bands in the first place. Jono and I got to Lake Musi on a particularly misty Thursday morning to get checked in and get set up. We got there early, so we had a bit of time to kill before we were able to check in. So we took a walk down to the festival grounds, where Jono helped me get acquainted with the festival grounds. Our walk took us through the main campsite, where all the early comers to the festival were busy trying to get set up. Now, I was warned prior to going to Misty that it'd be fucking cold, but no one bothered to warn me about the wind.
Fucking windy!
So between mouthfuls of my own hair and watching these poor souls not have their tents turn into kites,
It might come back.
I was actually pretty entertained, to be honest. After that little experience, we hit the main stage where the sound crew was busy finishing setting up. The sound and visuals for this show were unbelievably good, a result of a team-up between Audio Culture and Rock Solid Sound Productions. Like seriously, I had virtually zero complaints about the sound the entirety of this weekend, which if you compare to my criticism of the Ramfest second stage, that's actually saying quite a bit. After getting a lay of the land and Jono introducing me to some folks, one of them being Yaku Nodia, who was the main sound engineer for the weekend, we headed back up to the hotel room where we were allowed to finally check in. And this, I'm ashamed to admit, is where the broke boy in me just truly shone through. A whole hotel room to myself? You could have given me a piece of carpet and a blanket and I would have been fucking stoked for the opportunity. But here we are. So while Jono was busy setting up his PC and various other bits of gear, I seriously felt so under-equipped for this whole event. I had a moment to just gather myself and get ready for the bands that would be starting on that Thursday evening. At around 2, we headed back down to the grounds with all of our gear, getting ready to set up our workstation for the weekend. Once that was out of the way and the workstation was set up, Jono sent me on a mission to film the campsite. And this is where Misty started to show me what it was really about. While I was initially nervous of just wandering around filming a campsite full of people just trying to set up their tents and go about their day, I quickly realized just how friendly everyone here was. Almost everyone greeted me or chatted to me or just welcomed the camera without hesitation. After a couple of trips around the campsite, it was time to head back to the backstage area and just get ready for the first few bands of the weekend. And this is where I also happened to meet the dedicated photographer for the weekend, a man by the name of Evan, who was a cool dude and who inadvertently gave the best advice for a broke boy like myself to find the most affordable gear possible, which I am definitely going to be doing. And with all of that pretext and setup out of the way, let me get into the music. As I said earlier, this lineup consisted of 27 artists across 3 days. And for the sake of this video's runtime, I'm going to cover the artists that stood out to me the most, for better or for worse. So if you're left out, I promise it is nothing personal. My introduction to all of the bands was brought to me by a man named Steve, who is the recurring MC of Misty Waters. And let me tell you, very few things embody the spirit of this festival more than this man's character and personality. Every band, no matter what, got his full enthusiasm, and he made me genuinely excited to hear who was coming up next. Which leads me to the first band that stood out to me, Simeon Kriel. Band stood out to me as an indication of the quality of the acts to come. Now, I'm not sure if this was a solo act with a band of session musicians or if the band is just called Simeon Kriel, but the vibes were good. They had a great presence on stage and they interacted with the audience in a mostly wholesome way. The music was pretty much just straightforward Afrikaans alternative rock, and I'm pretty sure there were a couple of English covers thrown in there that were converted to Afrikaans, but my memory could be serving me wrong. And if my memory isn't serving me wrong, I think they worked out pretty great, and I didn't actually hate them. This band has a ton of potential, and I'm super stoked to see what comes out of them in the future. The vast majority of bands on this lineup were bands that I had either never seen before or even heard of before, so a lot of the time I actually didn't know what to expect going into their sets. Absolute Silence was one of those bands. They describe themselves as a piano rock band from Nashville, Tennessee, and based on that, I was expecting a set of ballads and mostly chilled songs. But holy shit, was my expectation wrong. I am completely baffled at how this three-piece band consisting of drums, bass, and a piano could sound that massive, with that much energy and not a guitar in sight. The guitarist in me has never felt so relevant in contributing to a huge sound before. These guys have an unbelievable stage presence. There was a point where I was standing off to the side of the stage, trying to get full bit of the crowd, when suddenly the bassist and vocalist just came running past me, dragging an audience member behind them so that they could put her up onto stage to mash a single key on the piano to contribute to the song. I didn't even see these dudes get off of stage. What the fuck? Considering that this was their first time in South Africa, I genuinely hope they left a mark on the people who watched them, and I really, really hope to see them on our shores again in the near future. Because if we don't support the smaller internationals who come to our country, why should the bigger ones come at all? Just a little bit of a food for thought. Maybe a foreshadowing of another video that's coming soon. The thing that I started realizing pretty quickly at Misty was that no one was going to sound the same on this lineup. You'd go from Afrikaans alternative rock and chaos to doof music in the span of a couple of hours, but it somehow still all felt cohesive, like there was a journey to be followed sonically throughout the day in this festival. Taxi Violence is a band that's been around since the early 2000s, and if I'm not mistaken, they've been on something of a hiatus for quite some time now. Their last release coming out in 2015. I mean, I last saw this band live in like 2014 at a Park Acoustics or something, I think, and I don't recall having seen much from them since then, but I could also just be blind. There is a lot of shit going on in the music scene, surprisingly. I am happy to say, though, that the band is just as good as I remember them being. You can see the nostalgia in the crowd with it being most of the 80s and 90s folks who were around in the heyday boom of South African alternative within that era, and also just catching up with a fan favorite of that era. Seeing them on stage serves as a reminder that South African alternative music actually has a legacy, and that newer bands are part of something bigger than just the current moment. And then we go on to Fokofpolisiekar, which is another duo of artists who caught me completely off guard. I remember Jono coming up to me before the set asking me if I'd ever heard their music before, and his explanation to me when I said I hadn't was, it's doof, but it's fun. And I can't think of a better way to explain this. I enjoyed this so much more than I could have expected. I also found it hilarious how the age demographic of the front row immediately shifted from Taxi Violence's 80s to 90s crowd to a bunch of teenagers, like in a fucking heartbeat. That was pretty funny. I think this was also the set where some dude just spent the rest of the night death staring me because I refused to pick up his cup that had fallen over the barrier, and it was mildly amusing, so thank you, dude. Seeing an act like Fokofpolisiekar reminds me of the fact that just because an artist's music isn't necessarily your cup of tea, it doesn't mean that their performance is not worth checking out. Because I would 100% make an effort to go to a Fokofpolisiekar show in the future. The combined onstage charisma of both Peach and Naxi just had me so entertained the whole way through. It does not surprise me that these guys have become as big a name as they have. I also got the chance to have a chat with Naxi the following morning, and just what a cool, chill, humble guy. Like, just you wouldn't think. If you met the dude in the street, had a conversation with him, you wouldn't fucking know, is what I'm saying. The last act of Thursday was a DJ by the name of Carrie Ann. We caught some footage of her, we called it a night, we packed it up, and we headed out. And to be honest, I was nowhere near as tired as I expected I would be, considering I'd been running around for about 6+ hours filming with a camera. I'd actually enjoyed every bit of it, and I was feeling good about what the next day was going to bring.
Won't you leave me to die? I can see the fear in your eyes. Won't you love me to die?
I woke up crazy optimistic for the day, only to realize that it had rained in the early hours of the morning.
Oh God, they trying to drown me in that hope.
Wondering how this would impact the day, I headed down to breakfast to join Jono to chat about the plan for the day and go over the previous day's stuff. A major thing I appreciate about Jono is his willingness to teach and provide guidance. Now, a lot of you may know that I only picked up a camera about a year ago, and while I think I may have improved in the time since I picked up a camera, I learned more about how this thing works within a weekend than I had in the last year. So after going over my footage from the previous day and some valuable feedback provided, we headed down to the now wet and muddy grounds, where despite the rain, spirits were high and people were clearly excited for the day. This is also where I met an artist by the name of Katie Fall, who had played the Fringe Fest the previous day, which I sadly missed. After being drafted into her band purely based off the fact that one of her songs is called Send My Love to Your Mom, she would be gracious enough to provide this broke soul with a box of cigarettes. An act that earns my unyielding loyalty and respect. Check out her music, she's pretty cool. Now I know I said I wasn't going to talk about every artist on this lineup, but now that I'm looking back at day 2's lineup, that's going to be pretty fucking hard. So I'm going to try my best to narrow it down, but this is still going to take a minute. Swimmer was the first band that stood out to me in a bad way. This band had absolutely zero energy on stage and practically no presence. Now, I understand. They were the third band up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the crowd wasn't particularly great at that point. But from my perspective, it looked like there was pretty much no effort put into even drawing in a crowd. Just a bland acceptance of, it is what it is, let's just mission through an hour-long set. And then in stark contrast to that experience, you have my favorite act of the entire weekend, Max and Love. These guys absolutely rocked my shit. From the music, the stage personas, the look, the entire vibe of this band is such a carefully crafted theatrical piece beyond just the music. Seriously, you can see how much thought and effort has gone into this live performance, but at no point does it come across cringeworthy or feel forced. Just a phenomenal blend of great music and theatrics. At one point, the vocalist had a guitar case mic'd up on stage next to him that he was using a chain as a percussion against it while he was doing this call and response bit with the drummer about a broke man with someone ridiculing him. This whole moment was surreal to me. I get goosebumps just remembering this shit. I don't even think my explanation of them does them justice. I just don't have the right words to explain this to you. But all I can say is that if you have the opportunity to go watch Max and Love, you better fucking take it, because you won't regret it. Somewhere in this day, a man came up to me and hit me with the, "Hey, you're from Sludge Underground, watch your videos." And as always, I'm hit by the realization that you guys are real people that watch us, engage with us, and aren't just numbers on the internet. This man's name was Mark, and he turned out to be one of the most wholesome people I would meet throughout this whole experience. He chatted to me about music, his thoughts, he introduced me to his people. He even told me that he had bought some of our merch online with the hopes of wearing it at Misty. Mark, it was an absolute pleasure to meet you in person. Thank you so much for the kind words and the support that you've shown this platform. I cannot even begin to express how much we appreciate it. Something I forgot to mention about Steve, the MC, was his tendency to just show up as a random character from time to time. Whether it be as a ruster, or another musician, or with a beard full of fairy lights, this man's enthusiasm did not dip for a single introduction or outro of a band. He excited and entertained the crowd through what I can only call shenanigans, and this man got a chuckle out of me more than once over the weekend with whatever it was that he was doing or saying. Which leads me into the next band. You know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna... Sudden lighting change. Indie Dog was already one of my favorite local bands even before this festival, and this wasn't their first Misty rodeo either. I like to use this band as an example of what giving your all looks like, from stage theatrics to audience engagement to just damn good music. This band is just so clean and clearly well rehearsed live. They look like they're having a blast on stage, and they make you want to cut loose as well and join them. There was a point where they grabbed two members from the audience to come up onto stage and wave Indie Dog flags while Seb scaled the scaffold of the stage.
Oh my god, he on X Games mode.
This man climbs faster than I could probably run, to be honest. I don't even think he's human. What the fuck? Filming this band is so entertaining because at any point it looks like any one of its members is having the absolute time of their life. The Black Cat Bones were another band that I was excited to see purely based off of reputation alone, and they 100% lived up to the hype for me. The personality and style of each past member has just seeped into the character of the band, creating these distinct sounding eras of the Bones. The one that I got to watch being a very bouncy blues rock and roll with a touch of heaviness considering the current lineup. I loved every minute of it, every person on that stage showing such a clear love for being on it. There was just some pure, undiluted joy that oozed from this band's set that was just downright infectious. In between sets, I had a moment to catch my breath, just sit down and process what I had just filmed and watched. The next band up was Fokofpolisiekar, and while I was sitting there thinking about what a full circle moment this was for me, considering all the research I had done on the band's history and this was going to be my first time watching them, I wasn't expecting someone to walk up to me and greet me. Looking up, I realized the person standing in front of me was Francois van Coke, introducing himself, telling me that he had watched our previous video, and thanking me for all the kind words that I had said about Fokofpolisiekar, while I sat there trying to process what the fuck was actually going on. Like, this man even knows who I am. And honestly, the whole interaction left me with a pretty strong sense of achievement of the reach that this platform has been gaining slowly but surely. So I headed back to the stage and started filming Fokof as they launched into their set. Now, researching a band can tell you a lot about them. Their legacy. You can watch their old show clips, you can watch the highlights of their career, but nothing quite prepares you for seeing it in the flesh as to why a band has become considered legendary. This stage suddenly seemed too small for the personalities that were on it. And I remember standing there watching this band playing and thinking, yeah, so that kind of makes sense. Getting onto stage to film was like running into oncoming highway traffic. You had to be constantly aware of your surroundings, lest you be taken out by the absolute unit that is Fokof's bassist, who could be anywhere on the stage whenever he wanted to be at a moment's notice. This man could like teleport or some shit. Or Francois, who is just wildly swinging his mic around, doing handstands on stage, or standing on the barrier interacting with the crowd. Where do I even point my camera? There is so much going on at any given point. Seeing this band in person solidifies everything I learned about them doing my deep dive into their history. And say what you will about them, there is a reason that they will forever be cemented within South African alternative music history. I don't know why I emphasized points like that, but I think it sounded pretty cool. Fuck it. The last artist that stood out to me on day 2 were the Void Boys, Crash and the Void. And these boys, in my opinion, made the best use of the stage's visual setup. Don't get me wrong, it looked super sick for every other band that came before them, but no one else quite used it to play into their theatrics quite like Crash and the Void did. The intro being presented like a 1940s TV commercial, the lyrics to certain songs being presented up on the screen, and just the band's cosmic horror lore creeping in that's also a part of their music just scratches such a particular itch in my brain. Like with Max and Love, everything comes across as deliberate, intentional, but not forced down your throat to the point of being cringeworthy. I found myself having questions about the band's lore, to which Morris just like fucking smirked at me and was like, if you know, you know, bitch. And now I'm just left with like the Dark Souls lore equivalent of music that I've got to like research myself. So at this point in the night, I am freezing. Holy shit, it is cold. And now that I was no longer running around with the camera anymore, I was genuinely starting to feel it. But I didn't really care. Somewhere between filming legendary bands, being pulled into random conversations with strangers, and having artists I'd looked up to recognize the work that we do with Sludge, it all just stopped feeling distant to me. For the longest time, the South African alternative scene has been something I have spoken about so passionately, looked at with so much love, trying to be a doorway to draw more people into it, but at the same time, also feeling like an outside observer. But as I stood there at the end of Misty Waters Night 2, freezing my tits off, trying to process everything that had happened throughout the day, I realized that we weren't just an observer anymore. We had become a part of it. People are starting to see sludge as a component of the scene. God, hearing someone like Jono say that we're the soul of the scene hits me so much harder than I think even he would realize. That feeling alone made my bruised and raw feet entirely worth it.
Daar se stukkie van die hemel en die aarde hier rondom my. Ek speel gitaar as ek kan jou dink om jou uit my kop te kry. Ek wens jou alles van die beste, maar dis genoeg vir my. So asseblief meneer, sit harder die musiek, ten minste vir my.
Dropping into the final day of Misty, I woke up feeling a little bit fragile. My ears still ringing because a Captain Dumbass over here forgot to take his ear protection and just couldn't find a moment to go back up to the room and grab them. I'm going to be deaf by 40, aren't I? Nonetheless, I was ready to hit the final day of Misty with enthusiasm. We started this day off by heading down to the Fringe Theatre to catch a bit of footage before the main stage had actually fired up for the day. After a small dispute with the stage manager this side, we were able to capture some cool footage of After Agatha. I'm sad that we didn't manage to get more footage of the Fringe Theatre. This venue was pretty cool. The lights were sick, the sound was great, and it was just such an intimate little venue, which was a small problem for me because, you know, I'm huge and I was worried about being in the way.
Damn, boy, he's thick, boy!
I mostly got around this by just sitting on various seats in the front row where I had a minor encounter with a massive spider running across the floor to the stage, and as I looked up, horrified, I saw one of the Highway Apostle boys sitting a little bit to my left with a look of abject horror on his face, which unfortunately confirmed that I wasn't hallucinating, because I am terrified of spiders. I spent the rest of my time in the Fringe Theatre frantically patting my legs whenever I felt the slightest tickle. If you happen to see me, I promise you I wasn't tweaking. Maybe just a little bit though. Near-death encounter over, we headed back over to the main stage where the SA Blues Society project band was busy setting up to play, which is essentially a group of South Africa's most seasoned blues musicians coming together and just jamming it out on stage. Every 2 songs or so, a musician or a vocalist would swap out with someone else, and even included students on the opportunity to play on a festival stage. The entire premise behind this is incredibly wholesome to me, and I would have loved to be a part of something like this as a kid. So if you're watching this and looking for an entry point into playing live music, or you have a kid who has an interest in doing live music, I would recommend reaching out to them, checking them out, and getting involved. Leading up to the 4th set, I got drafted into being an impartial judge for the Crash and the Void lads for a competition that they had set up for themselves as part of a vlog that they had created for their drive down to Misty and their general Misty experience. You should totally go check that out once it's up, by the way. This was a whole game of judging who had managed to take the photo of the most unintentionally metal object on the drive down. Once I had impartially judged my way to a winner, I left the Void Boys with the statement of, "Let me go before I get fired," and then ran into Jono, who immediately just said to me about that, and then that was the end of my weekend. Thanks for watching. I'm kidding, I didn't actually get fired. But I did go on to catch a reggae band called Tidal Waves. Now, I don't interact with reggae much. I mean, I grew up with folks who listened to UB40 and Bob Marley, but I never personally interacted with the genre much beyond that. Because had I interacted with it, I would have known that Tidal Waves was a renowned South African band in its own right. I genuinely don't know if it's just the vibe of reggae or if this is the most stereotypical white boy shit ever, but I just felt so content throughout this whole set. Jakes is one hell of an engaging frontman, and he clearly sings like someone who's had multiple lifetimes of experience navigating the world and its systems, but still genuinely believing that it could be a better place. This whole set happening while the sun was starting to set, the calming nature of the music, just really made this one of the more memorable ones for me. I remember going through the set and thinking, man, there's so many people I wish were here. They would have loved this. This lineup had so many artists that were so distinctly different from each other. There was something here for just about every type of music fan, and so much potential to discover something that you might not have even realized you would be into. As an example, the band that followed Tidal Waves was a pretty straightforward blues rock and roll band called Blackwater. These two bands being so different from one another but still feeling like a natural progression through the night. I just remember Blackwater's bass as being so much fun to film. The dude was extremely charismatic on stage. After Blackwater, it was time for Zaan's Sonnecase. Who had to be smuggled to the stage because people just swarm him, apparently. Watching this man have to sound check his mic off to a dark corner of the stage while people are screaming his name trying to get his attention was pretty funny in hindsight. I mean, living the dream, right? The love expressed towards this man was undeniable, and I was so curious about what his live set would sound like after I'd gotten into his music a couple of months back. And his opening words to Misty summed up a feeling that I'd been experiencing for this whole festival. Daar is nie plastic mense vanaand by Misty Waters nie, which translates to there's no plastic people at Misty Waters tonight. Launching into his set, it's immediately apparent why he's become such a huge force in the music scene. At one point I saw him get onto a barrier, and my thought was, oh, sick, he's probably just gonna interact and engage with a few people while standing up there. But no, this man got off the barrier, into the crowd, and started hugging people, greeting them, humanizing himself so much more beyond just a figure on stage, all while still performing. The reason that people in this crowd loved him so much just laid out completely in the open. Somewhere during this set, I had the pretty funny experience of having a shirt launched into my face by the bassist, who later apologized to me, explaining that he meant to launch that 40 feet into the crowd, but it obviously didn't make it that far. Something that I greatly appreciate about Zaan's live set is that he obviously has an incredibly talented group of musicians in his band backing him, and holy shit, does he not stop those boys from cutting loose. For example, Timothy Lotter, who in my opinion is one of the best guitarists that this country has to offer at this point, gets to put his skills fully on display. After the set, while waiting for Zaan to tear down and the Hevels Fantasties to set up, I was hit by this pretty profound statement by Jono, pointing out Zaan interacting and doing a meet and greet with his fans. And what Jono had said was, this is the difference between these guys and everyone else. They always have time for everyone. They make people feel valued and worth being at one of these shows. And that is a great takeaway for any artist who either watch them, aspires to be like them, or wants to make music. Misty Waters also has this pretty sick tradition of sending out an effigy, I don't know if that's the right word, of the Misty Waters name onto the lake and setting it on fire. This is the moment where everyone gets to take a break from the chaos, where they get to spend some time with a loved one, family, or friends, and just burn this moment into their memories. I genuinely hope that this is a tradition that sticks around for Misty as long as the festival continues to run. Then it was time for the Hevels Fantasties. Who I had last seen in like 2011, 2012 at a Randfontein show back in the day. I was fresh into music. I had just picked up a guitar. I had no idea how the local scene worked or that it even existed. I was just told, be stoked about this band. And while I don't really remember much about my first time seeing them all those years ago, this performance is not something I'm going to forget anytime soon. Seeing Fokof and the Hevels Fantasties within a day of each other really drove home the legacy of Afrikaans alternative music for me. Because while I didn't speak on the Hevels Fantasties in my Afrikaans alternative video, they were just as big a part of that era as Fokof was, both bands sharing a member in Hunter Kennedy. This set had me feeling like I was floating through it, especially during a song like Mevrou Sonneblom, where I was standing in the audience catching footage from a crowd perspective, people on each other's shoulders, dancing, vibing, just lost in a moment with an artist that clearly means so much to them. And catching moments like that just brings me so much fucking joy. I had to laugh going back to the studio version of Mejuffrouw Sonneblom, because why were the na-na-nas so aggressive live in comparison to the studio recording? Like, looking back on it, I've been dying. With the weekend quickly coming to a close, we dropped into the second last act of Misty Waters, the Man Motels. These boys came all the way up from Cape Town, and the Cape Town homies have spoken so highly of this band that I was so stoked to finally catch them live. And again, I was not disappointed. This band brought a different kind of energy to this festival, one that I was all too familiar with. Attention, a sense of you better be getting ready to throw down. And launching into their first song, it's immediately apparent why. This band is just raw, unfiltered punk, tackling all the themes and topics you would expect of the genre. Tell me how a three-piece band makes a festival stage feel like a cramped club show. The bassist's cap lasting all of 10 seconds before being discarded to the side with movements that would put a crackhead to shame. Like, seriously, like, just watch this dude. Like, I don't think I've ever had this much energy for anything ever in my life. There was this point where the frontman took the time to agree with Zahn's statement about there being no plastic people at Misty Waters, saying that this was the least pretentious festival he had ever played at. And that statement resonated with people, myself included. As a side note, the Man Motels were Jono's favourite band of the weekend, which is a huge contrast to mine being Max and Love, which, despite having a full lineup of artists after them, they still held that number one spot for me. And then we were on to the final act of Misty Waters, Doom Fairy. Who, for some reason, I got really mixed up between Doom Fairy and Daisy Arson. Maybe it's because of the fact that Daisy Arson appeared on stage with Doom Fairy at Ramfest. But this was the kind of confusion that confused everyone else. Huh? Because I was so confident in what I was saying, and I'm also the dude who supposedly knows what's going on, that I just confused myself and everyone. To the point where I think I even messaged Kaylee and was like, "Someone's stoked to see your act." And she never responded. I'm not surprised. I'm so sorry, Kaylee. Confusion aside, this was the perfect way to end the weekend. I have virtually no experience with drum and bass. I actually had to Google what Doom Fairy genre even was while writing the script. And based on the experience, I might actually just find myself at a drum and bass event in the near future, to be honest. With enough lights to induce an epileptic fit, bass powerful enough to rupture my now thankfully protected eardrums, I felt like I could drop kick a child throughout this set. There was an energy level here that just dragged life back into my exhausted, freezing body. This just sounded fucking huge. Hanu's wife joined him on stage, and I would have thought that this woman was a seasoned musician with the confidence and presence that she carried herself with on stage. But no, Hanu told us later that this was her first time ever performing, which is insane because I've seen musicians who have been doing this for years who carry themselves with less confidence than she did. And in my opinion, that's why Doom Fairy was such a fitting final act for Misty Waters. It was loud, chaotic, a bit overwhelming, a little confusing at times, but it was impossible to not just get swept up in the hype of all of it. And then it was over. The last act was done, with Steve stepping out onto the stage one last time to say goodbye and thank everyone for the weekend, with a promise of a bigger and better Misty next year, the 10th anniversary of Misty Waters. Looking around at the people hugging their friends, folding up their camp chairs, carrying off a couch that I assume has seen many festivals prior to this one, just squeezing the last moments out of the weekend before reality kicked back in. I kept thinking about what Zahn had said earlier that night. Daar is nie plastiek mense vanaand by Misty Waters nie. And there really weren't. Somewhere over those 3 days, I watched strangers become friends. Artists humanize themselves off stage, and hundreds of people from wildly different backgrounds come together for nothing more than a love of music and self-expression. I, myself, could not believe that I'd actually only met Jono for the first time 3 days prior. A person who gave me such a wild opportunity on a chance, ending this whole thing off like we had been friends for years. Thank you so much for making this possible, my dude. In a world where everything feels so manufactured, performative, and disconnected, Misty Waters was a breath of fresh air, a genuine passion project. If any music festival within South Africa deserves your love, it is Misty Waters. And I, for one, cannot wait to be back next year. I arrived at Misty Waters excited to film the festival. I left genuinely grateful being a part of this scene, this community, and whatever weird little corner we've managed to build for ourselves in the South African music scene. And to me, that is something genuinely special. Till next time, thank you so much for watching.